I call the committee of the whole meeting to order for Monday, March 17th, 2025. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda of the committee of the whole meeting of Monday, March 17th, 2025? Councillor Stetsky, Councillor Brissett. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we have two items up for business today. First up is Recreation and Culture Department to review fees and charges by law. We have Trevor here. On the floor is yours, Trevor.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I have a PowerPoint presentation for you.
Ooh.
As you saw in the council package, memorandum of our fees and charges bylaw for proposal for 2025 to 2027. Typically in Cranbrook, we've done our fees and charges for 2-year increments, and the last 2 fees and charges have been 1-year increments based on our recreation and culture service review. And subsequently prior to that was the basis of getting ready for it and then it being completed. So now we're looking at a 2-year cycle, getting us back on track. And staff have prepared 3 views at setting fees and charges. So our background is a typical comparative model of a 2 to 3% per year increase. The comparative model works or has worked in the past, but doesn't take into account each municipality's individual needs and each individual municipality's what we have for recreation services. So looking at alternatives this year, which are the benefits approach and the recovery rate approach. And then the plan for this is to bring back a bylaw for readings and adoption prior to May 1st, which is when our first user group starts registration under these new fees and charges. So the benefits approach is quite new for municipalities. This is the one that was, this is the approach that was recommended by the service review. It's not common because it is new and it was very difficult to find information on this. One thing we did find is that there are communities that are looking at this approach for all their fees and charges, not just necessarily recreation and culture. The recovery rate approach, if we look here, it doesn't look like that on my screen. So the recovery rate approach is typically done by larger centers. If council chooses to move a recovery rate, a percentage, obviously a smaller community would see higher fees to move 1% versus a larger community. So this particular recovery rate approach generally doesn't work with communities the size of Cranbrook. And a good example is if you look at aquatics at 26% is our current recovery rate. In order to get to 30%, which is a minimal jump, it represents about $75,000 worth of revenue, which is a 15% increase in all fees. Arenas, 40% is a $50,000, which would be an 8% increase in all fees, which is a lot smaller than Fields, which would be, in order to raise $13,000 more dollars, currently it'd be a 40% increase in all fees.
Yep. Yeah. Councillor Popoff.
Thanks. So Trevor, by recovery, you mean 100% recovery? What it's costing us operationally is 100% recovery?
Mayor Price to Councillor Popoff. So no, we're not talking 100%. We're talking, in order to move from 26% in aquatics to 30% recovery,
30%, okay.
it would be $75,000. And subsequently in arenas, which is 37%, which is a combination of Memorial and Kinsman, that would be, to move from 37 to 40 represents $50,000 in revenue. And Fields, we're approximately at 18% right now. To move to 25, that's $13,000, which is $13,000 is a small dollar figure, but it represents a large increase in fees. And the final here is this comparative approach, which is what we've done for a long time. So staff look at other municipalities, similar in size, similar in geographic circumstances, local to us. It works because we get a number, but as you can see, some of those comparatives up there, particularly you look at the arena. So the hourly rate for an adult in Kimberley for a local with all taxes and fees is $255.98 an hour, and currently in Cranbrook it's $245.58 for a local. And the bigger jump is that non-local, which I haven't been able to source from Kimberley, but I do believe because there's more people that go to Kimberley to rent ice than there is people coming, say, from Kimberley to Cranbrook to rent ice. So that non-local rate is, you see that it's almost $60 more, just over $60 more.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. Trevor, I'm just curious, for that Kimberley non-local rate, do we know do they count Cranbrook as local? I know, I gather they have teams coming from from Calgary, which to me is clearly non-local, but I'm just wondering if Cranbrook teams that are going up there are paying their local rate or their non-local rate.
Mayor Price to Councillor Ray. So I did call Kimberley to get that question. They just hired a new recreation services manager up there. The information was not crystal clear, but it sounded like if you were not a Kimberley resident, you did not qualify for the local rate.
Okay.
And the other comparative side, if you've looked at all the arena rates up there, but the aquatic side, we're very similar in rates. For adults, we're close. Youth, we're just not far off. And then the swim club lane, with all taxes and fees, is $18.17 in Kimberley and $14.06 here. And that is another number that I find varies no matter where you look.
Councillor Stefsky.
Yeah, thank you. So just looking at the rates, Cranbrook groups going to Kimberley, where they would pay more in Kimberley, but is it so just a lack of space and opportunity in Cranbrook that would make them go to Kimberley? Like, why would they offer to pay more?
Mayor Price to Councillor Stefsky, that's a great question. So we have our 3 rinks here. Kimberley has their 2 rinks. I don't know, in talking to Cranbrook Minor Hockey, that we have enough prime time ice to suffice their needs. So I guess it's the cost outweighs the loss per se, or the benefit of practicing at 8 o'clock versus 10 o'clock here, perhaps. I don't know 100% why teams would travel outside of Cranbrook, other than for a lack of ice space. And then moving forward, the recommendation from staff is a hybrid benefits approach. Oops, sorry about that. So with the current data, a hybrid approach for benefits, a benefits approach would be based on a facility type or an admission type. So an hourly rental would be sort of one style of benefits approach, and a drop in admission would be a second style of a benefits approach. And making changes so that our memberships are based on a data, like a multiple of the admission as opposed to just a CPI index increase or a comparative model increase. I believe council brought forward that our aquatics membership was a random 77.2 visits to get there. And so staff are investigating and figuring out a determination as to what the benefit is. What is a membership of Swimming About? And looking at our membership's current database, our aquatics and squash are very low. So we're looking at combining those into a single membership. So if you get a 6-month or a 1-year membership, you're getting access to the pool, access to the squash club, and access to the walking track, instead of having to purchase everything individually. I believe we currently have 3 squash court memberships. So the punch pass, once again, is the true winner. Everybody seems to want a punch pass. So how do we get our memberships a little bit more sweeter sounding than a 10 punch or a 20 punch or a whatnot?
Councilor Bissell.
Thank you. So a member of the public had brought up also about having the similar system for the arenas, like for skating. Is that a possibility? Like, because he's someone who likes to, go skating for exercise. So the idea of getting a punch pass or something for that.
Mayor Price to Councilor Bissett. So yes, from a punch pass perspective, we are definitely looking at that. It could also be something that's just added on to a 6-month or 1-year membership as well. The amount of drop-in skating that we do is very, very minimal, but the ease of access, as opposed to scanning your card versus having to stand up there and pay your $4 or $5 is also a benefit as well.
Councilor Steske.
So historically, have we ever looked at sort of cost benefit of increasing fees? Like in the end, if we increase fees to the point of where users aren't coming anymore, there's a net loss. So historically, have we ever looked at a price increase and then looked at impact in terms of the bottom line around that particular activity? And secondly, curling rink, does it fit in here anywhere?
Mayor Price to Councilor Stetsky. As far as the the cost benefit and memberships dropping off, I don't believe any study has been done on that. So moving forward, Rec and Culture is trying to do more user end surveys to get that data. And we do recognize that at some point there is a cap on all fees. It's I don't know if you'll find those fees before you get there though. I mean, any survey, everybody's going to tell you they don't want to pay more. They want more services without paying more. So that's that one aspect. And then, do you want to add?
Whatever we agree to today, I would really like to see a follow-up a year from now in terms of what happened. What was the cost benefit in the end around that particular service?
Mayor Price, City Councilor Stetsky, exactly what we're planning to do. So with our new recreation software, it is currently tracking this data on a daily, weekly, monthly, and annually basis. So it won't give us, I mean, we'll have to do manual calculations, but it will tell us what our usership is doing with our pilot projects, with our fees and charges and whatnot. And back to your second question with the curling club. So no, the curling club is operated wholly by the Curling Club Association. The last point on the staff recommendation is just clarification and points throughout the bylaw to make the day-to-day operations easier. That's one of the struggles that we have with the staff and with the public in that communication sense of the ambiguity of the bylaw and just adding clarification to it.
Councilor Reyes, question.
Thank you, Mayor. I might be jumping ahead. This might be in a later slide, so feel free to tell me that. So one item I've been thinking about is, I went back and reviewed the original report about the fees. And so we know we have a lower cost at the Memorial Arena, which kind of includes the Kinsman, I think, because of the shared ice plant and shared staff and stuff. So we know that's a lower cost, and then we know that Western Financial Place is a higher cost. But then I think I recall a conversation where there was discussion about, let's just set a flat rate for ice, and doesn't matter where you book it, this is what it costs. And I do understand that from an administrative point of view, like in terms of simplifying operations, I totally get that. But then I go back to, if you're buying a Toyota Corolla, you want to pay the price for that. And if you're buying a Cadillac, you want to pay the price for that. So then I kind of go back to it, does it make more sense to go with those actual price points? So I just wondered how that discussion of a flat ice cost versus like specific to the facility, where that's fitting in these days.
Mayor Price to Councilor Ray. So there's been a lot of discussions on that. Staff are starting to figure that the cost of ice at Western Financial Place is ranging higher because it's less used. So it doesn't necessarily come across that way, but yeah, the facility operations are a lot higher than they are at Memorial and Kinsman. Just from that ease of use, we took the fees from both facilities, or so the expenses from both facilities, to find a middle ground, which would, if we chose them as separate sites, they would have two separate rates. So as you'll see when we move further, that staff have looked at amalgamating those fees so that Western Ice would be cheaper, Memorial would be more expensive, but it would be a middle ground. I think if we went with a true recovery rate or benefits approach, Western Financial Place would be too expensive. So, but I mean, that's why we're here to discuss this.
And just a follow-up, if I may. One other question, and more for clarification. I guess just before I move on, I do appreciate that we are seeking to be like a more efficient operation in terms of like we're selling a product of ice time, and how can we do that most efficiently and effectively. So I really appreciate all the thought that's going on behind the scenes about this. So just for clarification, so around fields right now, I've never been the person who books the fields. So it looks like it's based on the number of people who show up on a given night is what the group pays for a field. Is that how it's currently working, like per user versus you're thinking of moving to an hourly fee?
Mayor Price to Councilor Ray. So our user groups, youth pay $20 per athlete per season.
Okay.
So, and this was a large increase from last year. So last year's rates were, I believe, $12.50 a child, and we moved them to $20 per child this summer. And adults pay a team rate. So it's $500 and something per team, and that's cheap, regardless of how many times you use the field. So if it's 5 times a week or once a week, that's the rate currently.
Cheap.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor. Trevor, can you give us a general idea, like with Kinsman Memorial and Western Financial Place, ice time, like, is it fully booked for the most part during prime time? And I guess with the times that are in less demand, like I'm just trying to get an idea of what the demand is for ice time. How often is it fully booked? I don't know if I'm wording this question properly. Do we have people fighting for our ice time, or is there like open space where we need to fill it up?
Mayor Price to Councilor Peabody. That's an excellent question, because that is the big debate on ice. So Monday to Friday, from approximately 3:30 till 10 p.m., all of our ice sheets are packed. That's without a doubt. Weekends, our prime time is from 8 to 8. Our weekends, our usage is way down, like maybe 1/3. So minor hockey uses it for tournaments. They use it for their tryouts at the start of the season. And then there's a couple of hours worth of practices during the week. So, or during the regular part of the season. So it's rarely used up solid on weekends. Obviously we have the Cranbrook Bucks use a lot of the ice at West Financial Place with the team in the academy. But during the day, there's a lot of empty ice. So Memorial is used up mainly with, we have 2 bookings at the Memorial during the week. And then we have our classes, our students, our joint use. But for ice at after that prime time, so after 9 o'clock, after 10 o'clock, where prime time in most communities goes to at least 11, and I believe our bylaw says 10 or 11 o'clock here as well. It's empty. So most nights we don't have anything on the ice past 10 o'clock.
Councillor Stetsky.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So we've received a few emails, of course, on the proposed changes at the swimming pool. One of them suggested that there have been exercise classes, I guess, canceled because of lack of staffing. I don't know whether you've had a chance to look at that one yet or not, but any of the decisions we make today potentially affect future staffing levels, particularly at the pool. I guess we'll focus on that, but just in general.
Mayor Price to Councillor Stetsky. So I don't believe any of the decisions around fees and charges are going to affect staffing levels at all. All right. So in this benefits approach, this is what staff are recommending as a general recovery rate and tax support rate. So youth that benefits the most from sport would pay the least. These numbers here will translate into our next slide. So using adult prime as an example, the current rate is $222.75 an hour. The hourly cost average of both facilities is $329.52 with a recovery rate of 75%. Would have a proposed rate at $247.14, which would be an increase of $24.39. And what staff are recommending is that we take the increase per hour and put that over the 2-year term. So fees and charges bylaw being 2 years, each year would see a half of that increase to get to that number. And this will give us the data for usage. So if we increase our fees to a subsidized rate or a benefits rate of 75%, how does that affect our usage? And then in 2 years' time, we'll have enough solid data to be able to say that we've ceilinged, we've gone too high, or we're on the right track and whatnot.
Is it okay?
Councillor Bassett.
Thank you. So are you going to go through each category here? Or I just want to, I don't understand, what's youth registered to become youth prime? I'm not sure on that because that's quite an increase. And then compared to youth non-registered to become non-prime, like I need the information on that, please.
Perfect. Mayor Price to Councillor Bassett. Good question. So one of our clarification issues was the youth registered versus youth non-registered. And a lot of times council had decided many terms ago that minor hockey and minor sports were to be subsidized the most, and anybody that wasn't part of that would be subsidized less. So hence the registered versus non-registered. And the issue that we run into now is that we have groups that rent the ice outside of Cranbrook minor hockey, but it's for minor hockey. and spring ice the elite teams in the summer, and then the Avalanche teams that aren't necessarily a house team, they're more of a elite team. So who gets what rate? And that's the argument that it ends up coming down to is most municipalities nowadays do a youth rate and a youth non-prime rate and an adult prime rate and an adult non-prime rate. And if we move down further, hockey schools, academies, and camps, that is a absolutely massive increase. But that is using this benefits approach. That is the standard sort of look at a recovery rate of 100%, as most camps, most of these academies and schools are for profits. They're a commercial business.
Councillor Popov.
Yes, thank you picking up on that. So would it be your recommendation we get rid of the registered and non-registered? I think even just from a staffing perspective of who qualifies for what must be a whole nightmare.
Mayor Price, through to Councillor Popov. Yes, that is the recommendation from staff.
Thank you.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
But you have it there on the screen, both registered and non-registered. So are you taking that out or?
Mayor Price, through to Councillor Popov. Yes, so youth registered is the current rate, and it's to become youth prime, which would be the new terminology behind it. So it was just a comparison. So right now, minor hockey pays 114.60 per hour, and the recommended rate is 164.76 based on this benefits approach.
Sorry, but then you just talked about other municipalities don't have the registered and non-registered. And yet you still have it on the board there. And you talked about the confusion it is to which category do they fit in. So you still have it on the wall. So you're recommending we keep it, or do we just get away from the registered, non-registered and have one set rate?
Mayor Price, to Councillor Popov. Yes, so it's only on there for current verbiage, but it will be removed. That is the recommendation, that it be removed if council so wishes.
Councillor Ray, then Councillor Szewski.
Just a couple of quick questions. So for the skating club under our current setup, what category is the skating club in?
Mayor Price, to Councillor Ray. So the Cranbrook Figure Skating Club is under the registered, youth registered.
Okay. They're not registered under Cranbrook Minor Hockey, but they're registered under something. Is that kind of how it goes?
Correct.
Okay, very good. Gotcha. So it's an organized thing. Okay. And when we talk about youth prime and youth non-prime, when we say prime, we mean prime time. Yeah? Is that what prime means?
That is correct. So
Yeah.
prime time in Cranbrook is,
Yeah.
After school until 10 or 11 p.m.
Yeah.
Weekends, it's 8 to 8.
Gotcha. So exactly, anytime, whether it's adult or youth, when we say see prime or non-prime, it means prime time versus not prime time.
Correct.
Gotcha. Just one comment, one advantage I see to this benefits approach is it's very clear. Like it's consistent and it's, I think, transparent and understandable. So I see that as a potential benefit. And one thing I noticed in the report as well, and looking back at it, there's that one step graphic that talks about, you can set your sort of benefits chart like we have, but then you do have the opportunity to refine with additional criteria. So anyways, that's something for us to keep in mind as well.
Councillor Szewski.
Thank you. I'd just like to turn to hockey schools and academy camps for a minute. That is, of course, a really, really significant increase. And do we have any idea what, for example, academy camp ice time costs the academy and other communities? Like that's a really, really significant jump per hour. And I'm wondering why they wouldn't just move some, say it's too expensive in Cranbrook, let's go to Kimberley or go somewhere else if we agreed to that price increase.
Mayor Price, to Councillor Szewski. Yeah, it is a very high increase. And without doing the research, I can tell you that's, other than in possibly the lower mainland, that it is going to be the most expensive ice for like certain hockey schools and certain hockey camps for sure. So if that recovery rate or benefits approach number would like to be changed, I believe this is the correct place to have that conversation. But based on the service review and based on the communities that do this, commercial is recovered at 100%, if not 100 and more percent.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree that is, of course, a significant increase in price. At the same time, and we just recently had the presentation from the Bucks, including an item about the Kootenai Hockey Academy. If we look at people sending their kids to the Okanagan for a hockey school, then there's additional costs of where's your kid living, and you gotta, all those costs associated with having your child live somewhere else quite far away. So, I think it's a good discussion about whether or not we want to go to that 100%, but I think it's somewhat balanced by the benefits of having a local hockey academy. So I think there'd be a cost benefit analysis for families when they look at that kind of price that might still be in Cranbrook's favor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutzky.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, depending on where the kids are coming from to attend academy here in Cranbrook. And I don't know whether we have any statistics on whether these specifically are Cranbrook kids or they're coming from other parts of Alberta or BC to attend our camp already. Any idea on that information, where they're coming from?
Mayor Price to Councillor Stetson. No, unfortunately, the Hockey Academy is a private for-profit business, so we don't have those details. We haven't inquired on those details, but I do believe that information like that would be pretty readily available.
Just a point, Trevor, when do you need a decision on this from council?
Mayor Price, so the plan is to bring this on Monday, next Monday.
Okay.
For 3 readings. So I will be formulating this bylaw based on our discussion today and submit that in, and we can have a wholehearted conversation then.
So it's imperative that we agree or agree to disagree today, so that, after the decision's made next Monday, we're not all out in the community with 4 or 5 different positions on this, right? So, yeah. Councillor Graham has his hand up.
Yeah, yeah, I think the cost recovery for academies and camps is probably reasonable to get 100%. You're already spending $25,000 to send your kid to one of these camps, so awesome. That's just the cost of playing elite hockey.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, you're going to have a camp. They're charging youth now, or the athletes, to pay for the camps now. Way different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. That was all provided. They pay now to attend a camp, or a hockey school or whatever. So they're paying. And you look, you got anywhere from 21 to 30 on the ice. So you break that down. That's not a big dollar when if you're thinking one user, but across minimum of 20. That's not a huge increase for and those typically go a week or 2 weeks, something like that as well too, right? So I don't think it's a make or break item for an academy or for a hockey school. Councillor Bassett.
Thank you. I guess my concern is I think we would like to keep the hockey school here. And I'm afraid of them going somewhere else. Because, yeah, it is 20 kids on the ice, but this is per hour. Those are a lot of hours. That's a substantial increase. And I'm just wondering if, I don't know, like, that's quite a jump. And I would think definitely we'd need a phased in approach on that, with the eventual goal of getting to 100%. I'm just concerned about them moving, and then we have nothing on that.
I guess a
Correct.
question to Mark on that point. So if we're not charging 100% and it's a private enterprise, the charter says that, a local government cannot provide an incentive or whatever. And that may be a way to explain it. You know what? We are doing exactly that if we're not charging 100% recovery.
So just on that, Mayor Price, so at this point, it's up to council. It's like anything when we negotiate a contract for any kind of a fee for service or any type of use of our facilities, it still comes to council. And so, currently, some of the ventures that do take advantage of the subsidized rates of ICE that we have now, that's the negotiated rate on the contract. That's how it works. So that's fine. Like, it's not a, whatever you call it, a prima facie subsidization that is, out there like that. It's a negotiated contract price. So it has to work, as Councillor Brissette said. If it doesn't work, then you don't have a contract. So we have to find that place. But subsidizing commercial ventures with taxpayer money is fraught. And so through this discussion, it's finding where is that place that makes the most sense. That's what we're working towards. Yeah. And it might not be all the way, it might be part of the way. So we'll just have to find that place.
Yeah. Councillor Graham, Councillor Peabody.
Yeah, and I think we have to be cognizant that this is just operation costs. Like, how much do we spend in maintenance and everything else in the buildings? Like this isn't a quantified cost of the true cost of these buildings. This is just to operate. So if we actually wanted to say, well, how much does it cost for the memorial? There's a whole nother section of cost that goes into there. This is just operations. So we are already subsidizing the cost by eating all the maintenance because the plant goes down. It doesn't affect the rates. So I think we need to quantify that as well, that this is just truly the operations.
Good point. Councillor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think I agree with Councilor Blissett. Like, as much as I'd like to charge $329, and it'd be interesting to see if there's a demand for ice time at $329, it also has to be, comparable to a price that people will actually pay. I don't know if it's worth maybe charging the same as the adult prime rate at $250 and kind of keystoning it there. But it's interesting with any product that you're selling, and that's what we're doing. We're selling a product. It's trying to get the highest price that you possibly can that people will actually pay. And we don't want to make it too cheap that it's too much demand, and we don't want to make it too expensive that there's no demand. Just an idea to throw out there with the hockey schools and academies and camps. What do you think about doing like a tiered discount rate depending on how many hours they book? So, if they're booking 10 hours of ice time, they get a 10% discount. If they're booking 20 hours of ice time, they get a 20% discount. So instead of just throwing like a cheaper rate out there, trying to throw a little fish in the lure out there to get people to actually book more ice time for their camp, as opposed to just booking the minimum amount, giving like some sort of spot for them to reach to make it cheaper and more affordable.
Councillor Stetsky, then Councillor Ray, then Popoff.
Yeah, another approach on that one might be to split it into sort of a 2-year increase, as I think was suggested that, we pick a certain percentage immediately, and with the idea and the understanding that we're going to 100% a year from now or however long we want to do it, which gives the hockey schools and academies some time to look at where the final bottom line is. And I guess the distinction that I've heard, it really is profit versus non-profit. And so are all the other groups we deal with in Cranbrook non-profit, or should that principle of profit pays 100%, whether it's this year or next year, apply across the board? So is everything else in Cranbrook non-profit?
Mayor Price to Councillor Stetsky. So just prior, the staff recommendation is that the increase rate is split over 2 years. But as far as the non-profits, I'm not 100% sure on that side of things, but I would guess that all of our Adult groups are nonprofit. I don't know if they make a profit in their leagues and whatnot, but as far as minor sports, those that are governed by PSOs, provincial sport organizations such as minor hockey and figure skating, and then the school groups that use our facilities are all, nonprofit and whatnot.
And you've said this is a 2-year proposal, so what are the proposed percentage increases by year then? I don't see them.
Mayor Price through to Councillor Stetsky. So the recovery rate is what staff have proposed for this benefits approach. The increase per hour will just be simply divided in 2 and then added 1 per year. So the example being adult prime is a $24.39 increase. It would be $12.20 per year for the next 2 years increase. And council, keep in mind that the average cost of $329.52 is based on 2023 numbers, not 24, 25. So that is from the service review. And that is 2023 recovery rates, not current. So at the end of this 2-year bylaw, staff would have to do another assessment and get the actual operating costs.
Okay, Councillor Blissett, or Councillor Ray, and then Councillor Popoff, then Councillor Blissett.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the suggestion from Councillor Peabody about kind of looking at a discounted structure. I think, like hockey camps usually have 4 hours of ice time per day, let's say. I don't think, so they're not set up to have additional ice time hours, right? Because they do dry land training and stuff. If we were to, I hear the concern about, are we pricing ourselves out of the market on the for-profit side for hockey schools and academies and camps? I would rather look at do we want to drop below 100%? If we were to consider that, I would like it to be above the 75% for adult prime. I think that's fair. On the other hand, as we're saying, we're already at 2023 numbers, so we're not at actually our current costs. So even though we're shooting for 100% recovery rate, it's not with our current 2025 numbers. So if we were to look at a discount, I'd like it to be above 75%, but these are commercial ventures and it is going to be split over 2 years. So perhaps we should consider sticking with the 100% recommendation for that category.
Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. Trevor, the schools, academies, camps, are those using ice time during what would be considered prime time?
No, Mayor Price through to Councillor Popoff. Yes, they use both non-prime and prime time slots.
So I think that's just another reason why we need to do the 100%. They're using the prime time, they're competing with the adult prime and the youth prime. So there's competition there, there's a desire there, and I think the 100% for the commercial would be appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Blissett.
Thank you. The decreases, what I'm wondering about is, say for adult non-prime, let's forget about it. Like, let's just keep it at the 187, then not have an increase. And then the same with for the youth non-registered, instead of decreasing by 33.93, just keep it at the 157, not have, just hold it there and not have a decrease. I mean, we're still not, as you mentioned, we're still not covering all our costs. So maybe you're not, 0 increase is fine, but I would rather not see a decrease.
Councillor Ray.
Just a quick addition to Councillor Blissett's comment on that, maybe red line those, right? That we're going to red circle those and they're going to remain at that price until the model catches up where, okay, 4 years down the road, okay, now they're eligible for an increase. So if we could just red circle those, perhaps, I think that's a good suggestion.
So I'll just remind council that we did do a citizen survey. We got 7 to 800 comments back. On the recreational side, overwhelmingly, what we heard is user pay. Because we know what the other options do. If we don't adjust our rates, we're gonna have to start either closing the door or changing the hours. We just made I think, a moderate change in the hours, and look at the blowback we're already starting to get a little bit. And, you know, that's pretty minor to where we may have to go if we don't get this under control here fairly soon. So, you know, I think this is a really good response to the citizen survey. You know what? We're listening. We put it out there. The majority of the citizens that responded, user pay. You know what? If only 700 or 800 chose to respond, everybody in the community had an opportunity. So I would say, you know, when you look at 800, there's 8,500, 8,700 households. So we got 10% of the households, you know, that are basically saying, yeah. We sure didn't get any that came back that says, leave the rates the same, not one. So just a caution there that, you know, it's always tough to, you know, have to make this move and be the ones that are, you know, accelerating rates, but we know where we're sitting with our budget. If we have to do something, and not just for this year, for the oncoming year. So, yeah. And I think, Trevor, you guys done a heck of a job on this. Further.
So this is our arenas, and we're just going to take a quick look at aquatics and field. So these, as you can see, these recovery rates are a lot smaller than the arenas, just based on the pure cost of operating an aquatic center. We'll pop over to our example sheet. As you can see, as I previously brought to council, that we average about 250 users a day. It costs $718.04 an hour to operate that facility based on 2023 numbers. 12 hours a day, $8,616, or it works out to about $34.47 per user. That's what it would cost to be 100% recovery rate based on the average number of users we have. So moving over to our,
Councillor Stetsky.
sorry.
Just a quick question. Every senior likes to feel they're super. What's the difference between a regular senior and a super senior?
Mayor Price through to Councillor Stetsky. Super seniors, I believe, start at the age of 80 based on our bylaw.
Councillor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor. Trevor, like on the report from the person at the contract, they calculate this number using a budget of like $1.8 million to run the aquatic center. But our budget, or like looking at this year's budget for the aquatic center, we're at $1.2 million. So where are they grabbing this extra $600,000 from to come up with this number? And then I guess on top of that, does this number of like $718 per hour, is that calculating like the maintenance and the repair of the facility? Or is it just what it costs to, you know, provide the service of swimming for an hour?
Mayor Price through to Councillor Peabody. As far as the numbers go, I'd have to look into them. I don't have those off the top of my head, but that number of $718.04 an hour is based on the operational requirements to operate that facility. So it is staffing, it is repair and maintenance, it is the chemicals. It does not cover any of the capital costs.
Yeah. So
if something breaks, that is not included in it, unless it's part of that operational maintenance fund that included in the 718.
Okay. Yeah, if no, before this comes back to us, if you can look into that, why there's no, our budget's 1.2 mil, but this number here is factored off of 1.8, that'd be great.
And so here is our aquatics comparison chart.
Counselor Bissett?
So on the infant, so is there an infant, like say, they're going with a parent. So are we we're charging an adult on that? Like, it can't be zero. Like, so it's zero for the infant and then the adult pays? Is that how it is? Or are they not paying for those infant? Oh, I guess I'm thinking infant swimming lessons versus infants in the pool. That's where I'm getting confused. Okay. So I answered my own question or no?
Mayor Price to Councilor Bissett, yes. So council at one point decided that infants are free of charge at the pool, but yes, they would have a guardian with them. And I believe any of our infant swimming lessons have parents in the pool with them, but that is a separate fee altogether. So council can see why our recovery rates are a lot lower than they would be for the arenas. And that's just based purely on the costs. Taking the family and swim club lanes, turning those into a multiple of an admission as opposed to a percentage of something.
Counselor Ray?
Thank you, Mayor. So I think we've chatted about this before as well, but just to include it in this morning's conversation. So I know like the city's busy, we've got a ton of things on the go, but when we look at our recreation stuff, do we have an opportunity with our aquatic services to do some marketing, some very reasonably cost but effective marketing to potentially increase our number of users? Because that's the other way to help with these costs. And I know that is not my original idea. That has already been included in conversations. So it's not a magic, that's not a magic wand, but how is that factoring into our thinking? Can we run that in parallel, I guess, to updating our fees?
Mayor Price to Councilor Ray, yes, we can definitely try more marketing techniques to get more users into the pool. That we definitely do that. Could we do it better? Yes. So that is something I will definitely take back to the team.
Counselor Steske?
And again, is this a 2-year proposal or immediate proposal, 1 year?
Mayor Price to Councilor Steske, yes. All of these today, all of our fees and charges, the staff recommendation is to 2-year. 2-year to get the data to find out if we are where we're at within the community. User groups, are we gaining, losing, staying steady?
For all proposals, and I'm more comfortable if it's a 2-year implementation program and we have a really solid look at the end of year 1 in terms of what the impacts have been.
Counselor Bissett?
Thank you. So considering how low the increase is for the pool, I personally don't see any need to go over 2 years. I mean, honestly, less than $1. So like, I'm sorry, no one's even gonna notice 50 cents. They may not even notice $1. And 18 cents per hour, you know what I'm saying? I think those don't seem too high to me. Honestly, I'm paying, let me tell you a story. Pretzels, a bag of pretzels has increased by over like $3. So I don't think an increase in it of $5 for an hour, so you're going from current rate of $4.20 to $5. And let's make, not the 17 cents, $5, $5.50, that kind of thing. I think that's fine, personally.
How
I'd be
about
fine with that. I don't see 2 years required.
$5.50 and we buy pretzels in bulk and we give them a bag of pretzels when they come in?
Mayor Price to Councilor Bissett, if I may, we want to keep in mind that from 2023 to 2024 or 24 to 25, however you want to look at it, there was a significant increase in admission fees. So a lot of these did go up by $1 last year. So, and we do not have the metrics yet as we have not completed that year of the higher fees. So I just, staff were very considerate of the previous fee increases when we looked at these recovery rates. But yes, I agree that 18 cents is not very much, but we need to remember that the fees did raise quite significantly last year.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. I think council is aware, but just want to share in the meeting. I understand that the swim club is concerned about the lane costs. I don't know all the details of how our swim club rates compare to other communities. I don't have those details at my fingertips. But yeah, just wanted to share their concern that around the costs and concern that the costs would discourage kids from being in swim club and make it difficult for kids to participate in swim club. Now, having said that, I don't know the details of how the swim club approaches their fundraising. I'm sure they're accessing kids sport grants as applicable, but I just did want to share. I do know there's that concern out in the community. I certainly appreciate staff's concern and mindfulness of the previous increases and therefore, even though they're small amounts, the desire to spread this out over the 2 years. So as I say, I don't know the details of the swim club's financial approach and strategies, but I do know there's concern out there.
Mayor Price to the Councillor Ray. Staff did meet with the swim club and the concerns were heard. And if we look back to the comparable slide a little while ago now, the rate difference between Kimberley and Cranbrook is about $4. Kimberley is $4 more expensive, but I know the operator of one of the pools in Kelowna and their rate is right around $9. So this is where that comparative model is very difficult because I don't know if somebody else is getting supplemented in another way to say. So that's why staff chose a particular rate. If council feels that we should try something different, I think that's more than reasonable.
Councillor Steske.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I know this isn't the comparison approach, but I would be interested to see, assuming we approve this, how that then compares, particularly with Kimberley, in perhaps when you bring it forward. So after implementing these for at least next year, how does that compare to Kimberley, just out of interest?
And now that we've looked at arenas and aquatics, we're going to move over to the fields here. So fields is a lot more difficult for Cranbrook to get fees and charges based on, we don't typically book all the fields. So minor ball and soccer, they just say, we want all the fields from this time to this time, whether they use them all or not, it's unknown. We hope that everybody's as accurate as possible. Confed Park, the city of Cranbrook, to my knowledge, has never booked Confed Park. It's just the youth pay their $12.50 or $20 this year per player, and it all happens. So these numbers here are when we look at the $38,000 and the field expenses estimated at $210. The $38,000 is accurate. We know how much money we brought in last year based on field usage. That's the youth per athlete and the adult per team, as well as the odd tournament that was run. The field expenses at 210 is a lot more difficult because when parks go to Moyer and they mow the lawn, they mow the green space as well as the field, the playing surface. So it's tough to say what the actual cost of the playing field is when, the mower puts in 8 hours at Moyer. Is it, 50% was playing field, 50% was green space, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the types of numbers that staff are still working on. So if we look at that, based on those numbers of maximum hours per use, so 210, $38,000 revenue, it basically comes down to $11.27 per hour. based on 5 months at 49 prime hours of use per week. And these are the proposed recovery rates again. And then moving over to our comparables. So at a current rate, which is $20 per youth, the hourly cost of the field is $11.27 proposed. The average estimated use of each field is 1/3 of its actual maximum amount, with a recovery rate of 50%, using a proposed rate of $14.09 per hour. So because we're trying to find numbers to fit into numbers, and nothing is as accurate as it can be, we did get some comparables with some other fields around us. So like Revelstoke youth per field is $11. Nelson Trail Cascar youth per field is $24.68. So where do we find the middle ground between $11 and $24? And then there's other communities in the Kootenays here that still do this per child rate or per athlete per season rate.
Councillor Graham?
What's our biggest cost driver for the fields?
Mayor Price, to Councillor Graham, it is labor. It's the mowing and the keeping the irrigation up and going. It's the
Have we looked at doing any contract? Would we contract any of that out? Would that reduce our costs?
Mayor Price, City Councillor Stetsky. Unfortunately, that falls under Public Works Director Hay too, but I don't know that answer right now.
That might be something to consider.
Councillor Peabody?
I would say the fields differ than our aquatic center and our ice time because it's not just used by sports groups. A lot of our fields are used by the general public all hours of the day and all hours of the night. So to accommodate the cost just by who's using it is tough. No, I feel like fields should almost be, considered the same way that we consider roads. We got to mow the fields, we got to plow the roads. And it doesn't matter who's using them or if they're from in town or out of town. So it's not that we don't want to recover costs, but I think we just got to perceive it a little bit differently than we do the aquatic center and the ice time. So trying to recover 100% of the cost just by using sports teams would be tough. But I agree, we got to charge a fair market rate. But what you're saying is that it's hard to figure out a fair market rate because every community has a broadly different rate.
Councillor Bissett?
Well, and I mean, I understand what you're saying, Councillor Peabody, but there is exclusive use while those groups are using it. Nobody else can go for a walk then. So, and I think, I think it's reasonable they want them maintained. They're concerned about the height of grass when they're playing soccer. They're concerned, there are some demands by those groups. I think it's a fairly reasonable cost. It's not the level that as you say, the pool is. We could never, going for 100% cost recovery on the pool is tough. But I think it's reasonable to have users help to pay for those fields, because if it wasn't for the sports use, it would be those fields would be different than they are now, right? They'd be more like wild spaces, and they wouldn't have to be mowed to the same extent. And there's some other concerns, right? So I think it is reasonable to have people pay. But anyways.
Councillor Stetsky?
Yep, thank you. Just curious, what does remove actually mean?
Mayor Price, City Councillor Stetsky. So the field rate non-registered and the tournament day, just remove them from the bylaw. They currently sit in there. I don't know what a non-registered field rate rental is, to be honest. I don't think we've ever used it in my 3 years in Cranbrook. It was put in for a reason at some point, and it's pretty much not used. Tournament day of $40 per field. If you can see that our recovery rate, that basically makes it a 4-hour day as opposed to a, instead of paying for the entire tournament. So I can tell that tournament costs in Cranbrook to operate the fields are very inexpensive compared to anywhere else because of this tournament day rate of $40 per field.
Sorry, so you're saying don't charge them at all or just not have it part of a bylaw that increases annually? When you say remove, particularly for tournament days.
Mayor Price to Councillor Setsky, I would suggest that we just remove the day rate, and if it's an adult tournament that is playing for 8 hours, they get charged 8 hours at the adult rate. And I just, if council can bear in mind that because we don't actually know what the hourly use of our fields are, this could end up resulting in a revenue loss. But I think it is the correct path to go down of start renting our fields by the hour. This will allow parks to close certain fields as necessary.
Good point. Good point. Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. Our fields, both baseball and slow pitch or whatever, and soccer, they're world class. As you know, you travel around to other parts, especially in the Kootenays. I mean, we have the best facilities here. So when you're looking at your comparatives, my recommendation would be we're at the higher level in terms of the comparatives because of the quality of our events that we put on, and that's all related to the quality of the fields that they're experiencing as a part of it. So my take would be look at the upper comparative rates.
Mayor Price to Councillor Popoff. I've heard that council perhaps would like a review of these fees in 1 year, even if we do set a 2-year bylaw. There is that possibility that staff could bring back an update on how the usage is going and how the rates have been accepted, et cetera. And this would be the end of our discussion.
Just a note, I spoke with Rob Gay on Thursday and or Thursday, Friday, and he actually mentioned to the board that they were going to undertake an Area C resident survey about fees. So he's got a feeling that maybe it might be time if they want to do a the statistically valid survey. And if they've got enough information in there, which, ours did, we explained the cost of some things, and that made a really difference, a real difference in some of the responses. So he feels that if he provides the right information, that there may be a chance that they will accept a taxation, and we'll put it into the next referendum. That's only a year and a bit down the road anyway. So yeah, that's what I said.
The only thing I wonder is if staff could, if we could have some consultation on that, because I'm not sure that they're going to ask about, would you rather have a tax increase or would you rather have a 2-tier system? Like, I'm not sure what they're conveying. And I'm just, because I can't, I mean, most people are going to say, no, we don't want to pay more. But the thing is that, but is it our position that you're going to have to pay something? And how are you going to do? Would you rather that as a 2-tier system? Would you like to go back to the 2-tier system, or would you like to do it on the taxes? I'm not sure that's being conveyed in the survey. And so I think that information needs to be discussed between our staff and then before that survey goes out.
Good point. Councillor Stetsky.
Another thing, Mark, this isn't a unique concept. I believe there are other regional districts that contribute to facilities. Creston, for example, so that might want to be in their survey as well. In other words, they're getting special treatment right now compared to many other communities.
So just Mayor Price through to Councillor Sketsy and Councillor Bissett. So those are all reflective of conversations we've had already with the regional district, and it's, so we'll just have to have them ongoing. And just while I'm on the microphone here, just back to Councillor Peabody's question. I was giving it some thought, and Cranbrook, our budget structure, we don't do service-based budgeting. And that's where the whole service is included within one budget. So the aquatics budget is reflective of what we code to aquatics with the way our budget is structured. And so the consultant, I would imagine, would have done that, the whole service cost. And that includes things that come from other departments or other sources, like things that cross over between departments and are coded somewhere else. So it's just how different budgets are structured. Like there's the concept of zero-based budgeting or service-based budgeting, which we don't have. We use business units that cover, it's in the general category of what they're named and how they, but it's how we code, how we track expenses year over year. And there is a difference in those two. And I was just thinking that's probably the answer there.
Council, anything further, Trevor? Trevor, thanks so much. Thanks your staff as well. That's great information. And yeah, I certainly see the rationale. I think, the way you're going there is probably going to be the easiest way to explain the changes to the community for sure. So thank you. Next up, Engineering Development Services Department review the revitalization tax exemptions. Mike and Rob. Welcome, guys. Who's yours, guys?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. We're here today to discuss the revitalization tax exemption programs that we've been discussing off and on. In your agenda package, we had provided you with a copy of the analysis or the report that was prepared by our consultant. So today we're just going to kind of go over some of the history and background of what they are, or the program that we used to have here. For those of you that may not recall or weren't super familiar with it, as it was back in 2013. The general bylaw structure and some considerations that we'd like to discuss with council. More the actual mechanics of the exemption versus the other bylaw stuff, because you can leave that to us. And then we'll look at sort of the next steps and path forward.
So I will go through this fairly quickly as it talks about much of the history and background. This is just for context, and council can do a little bit more research if they do feel so. But it just provides the basis of the community charter provisions that allow local governments to set this up, and it needs to be done defined by a bylaw and agreement with the property owner that's going to be going through the process. The exemptions may allow for value of land or improvements, and we're going to discuss that a little bit more in future slides. They are limited to the municipal property value, and the exemption can be no longer than 10 years. The authority to provide these exemptions is not subject to Section 5 of the Community Charter when it comes to prohibition against assistance to business. So this is one of those items where that does not apply when we talk about whether or not our incentives programs fall under assistance to business.
It's basically the conditions under which a council can establish a revitalization tax exemption would be to encourage environmental revitalization, either green building, brownfield development, natural stormwater management, economic revitalization, so industrial development, job attraction, social revitalization, i.e. affordable housing, or other, so redevelopment of a community, sustainability, conservation heritage, residential intensification. There's a number of different factors, and basically the gist of it is that whatever reasons we choose, they have to be explained or outlined in the bylaw itself, sort of as the rationale why we do this. And it actually has to be in the bylaw text, which is an interesting component. As far as the previous bylaw that we had, so some of you might recall that we did have the bylaw. It was back in about 2013 when we drafted it. Came into play early 2014. We did do a program extension. I think it was by a year or two through a bylaw amendment. But at the end of the day, we had about 12 applications during the downtown program in that window. well, some of the initial desire was to try and achieve mixed use commercial and residential. Unfortunately, that wasn't realized. And then, both anecdotally and just through, information we received and other, supportive information from other communities, there was no direct evidence to support that the exemption was the deciding factor for projects to go ahead, but it was kind of a nice bonus. So we'll get into sort of the amounts, but one of the comments we just received from our finance department was sort of implications of what happens after these go. And the one of the more current projects that we had would have been the Fire Hall restaurant. And they based on the quick math that I saw this in the email from finances, they saw about a $7,000 savings per year over the 5 years. So kind of give you an idea. And that's about what I recall Hideout being, something similar. I think Niche Clinic would have been slightly more because their assessed value went from, for the improvement from 0 to whatever it was for the new dental clinic. So again, they're not often, a factor whether or not a project goes, but it can be a nice bonus and can help, in those manners. There was one that I recall that I think at the end of the day, the application was probably more expensive than what they would have received from the actual tax exemption, just because the nature of the improvement to the structure didn't actually cause a significant increase in the assessed value. So it's sort of one of those situations, but again, it varies. So, I mean, some of the lessons learned though, certainly was, we want to, and we would engage with BC Assessment prior and during the development of the bylaw. That was something that we learned because, with our best efforts, we created the documents, but at the end of the day, BC Assessment has to, they're the ones who basically take the form that we send them and apply it. And so, we had to discover the wording or intent that we had wanted wasn't exactly clear. So we had to do a bylaw amendment way back when to change some wording. We want to make sure that the criteria is clear. And then obviously, I think create more promotion is something that would be an important factor for a program such as this.
And to follow through on that review, and these are some excerpts from the report that we have from our consultant. There's quite a few sub areas and geographies within the previous bylaw, so we're going to be considering simplifying these things. The term was limited to 5 years, whereas many or most other programs look at that full 10-year cycle. Exemptions only apply to the value of the improvements. The threshold of 400,000 was higher than most other municipalities. The percentage of the benefits range from 50% to 100% depending on the sub area. And the application fee was $350, which was higher than the other areas that were studied. So those factors we did look into it. Some of those are things that we would recommend changing or improving. Some of those do reflect current best practices. So there wasn't any consensus whether or not the previous bylaw was really good or really bad. Overall, it was a good bylaw within its structure, but there are some things that we could do to simplify it and perhaps capture more projects for more benefit. And then we'll go into the next section where, as Rob alluded to, there's a few different sort of decision points and best practice recommendations that staff would be considering for a draft bylaw, and that's what we're going to be discussing with council, just to understand the rationale and see if there's any feedback or conversation along those items. Okay, so one of the items that that through the review that we had by our consultant is whether or not a project would qualify based on the value of construction at the time of building permit or the assessed value after BC Assessment has had their hand in it. This provides the initial confirmation, this would be provided with the initial confirmation of a building permit submittal rather than waiting for the BC Assessment to determine the change in improved value. So under our old bylaw, and because we based it on other examples, it was, we found it much easier just to base whether or not a person would qualify or project qualifies based on what the construction value is. And then the value was validated, which we'll get into a little bit on the next slide. The value is validated by confirmation of receipts
Whereas like the BC assessment assessed value would require a person to wait till the next assessment cycle, then we would have the information on whether or not that assessment number was reached, and then they would qualify or not, and likely get the tax exemption in the subsequent year. So either way, you still require confirmation of project completion, because that is one of the factors. Obviously, you don't want to incent a development that hasn't been completed. Or then there was some significant changes or something that we want to make sure were captured. And then the actual exemptions themselves are based on the increase in assessed value of the building pre and post construction. So like I had said before, there was one application that we had that did a small addition, not resulting in an overly large increase in assessed value. And I think if I remember correctly, the application at the 350 or 400 was about what they might have saw back. So they would have broken even in terms of value. So where qualifying method. Okay, you can go to the construction versus improvement. So again, this is the exemption is based on the constructed improvements only and not the land value increases. Most programs do follow a similar format. Some did provide for exemption on land value. This is something that we were actually cautioned on back in 2013, just because land values are typically so subject to market conditions rather than improvements.
Yep.
That, if you were in a hot market, and someone's land value skyrockets, is that something we should be rewarding, right? Or encouraging? It's really about what they're going to build or construct on a property. So that was something that we had learned because of those situations. So we would be looking at, again, a much simpler, it's based on the assessed value of the improvements, because that's really what it comes down to, is you're trying to incent development and the improvement. As far as the amounts, a phased amount versus a flat rate. So this is something that kind of varied. If you looked at the comparison table, a phased taxation amount would, be something similar to, 100% in year one, 75 in year two, 50. So slightly decreasing to the point of full taxation, versus a flat rate for the term of the exemption, be it, 100% of the amount or 80% or whatever number we settle on. Each one can have its merits, but some considerations, obviously include the length of the exemption for qualifying projects. So for example, would we want to incent 100% for 10 years? That's something we can discuss, but it could be, depending on the development, could be rather significant, which means that the municipality is actually foregoing that extra taxation for a 10-year period, right? It has to be carried somewhere. Versus, you can incent a full amount for 5 years, or have it gradually decrease depending upon what we're trying to incent and where. Obviously, some of the things that we would look at based on previous examples too was the simplicity of administration. Something we want to do is make sure that it's easy to comply, it's easy to issue, it's easy for BC assessment to deal with, it's easy for finance. Some of these programs that are covered in the review by our consultant, I frankly, I just couldn't wrap my head around how they would work. And I mean, I'm not an expert in this, as I'm not a finance guy, I'm a planner, right? So, I'd like to think I have a fairly reasonable handle on this. And I was thinking, well, how the heck is this going to work? And how much work is this going to take? So that's something, again, would be worth looking at. Revenue forecasting, obviously, and the ease of transition to full tax amount. And so that example that I alluded to earlier, where a development saw the benefit, taxes went from 17,000 to 24,000 after the exemption. So that's where that $6,000. So after the 5-year period, it jumps to the full amount. Both options can achieve the same, overall magnitude of financial incentive at the end of the day. And as of right now, of course, we're looking at the downtown focus only because that's the one we started with. So we have a base bylaw. And since we now have a downtown revitalization master plan, we'd be looking at focusing on the core and the Maker Village areas, which are in the map, where larger projects are more likely and we have undeveloped sites. The only reason why we wouldn't look at the entire downtown area is we don't actually have the zoning set up for those desired land uses and those other categories we had for the mixed use infill and right until we go through and do the zoning bylaw and stuff like that. So having an exemption program that you can't really qualify for kind of is a moot point. So again, we would focus on the core, going back to kind of the original vision, but simpler in that, as was mentioned before, we had multiple areas. And back in 2013, the idea was that we would try and target some of those undeveloped sites for certain types of development. And unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way. However, one of the undeveloped sites we now have the foundry on. So, at the end of the day, things worked out in themselves. But that would have been a separate node that we were trying to target, sort of a mixed use. But a lot's evolved since that time. I mean, now we're in 2025 and people understand, mixed use, living downtown, those kinds of things are more in our vocabulary, and we're starting to see those types of developments being proposed as we've seen through the applications. So we'd look at, against incentivizing commercial and high density mix over the surrounding medium and infill areas for now until we're kind of, more set up through our regulatory bylaws. And then of course, if it's something that council would want to do would be to expand the broader downtown area. The next slide for sure would be looking at, again, facade improvements. The previous bylaw had a qualifying requirement of a $10,000 qualification based on the cost of construction. I think that's something we'd probably look at keeping very similar or the same, actually. I don't think it takes much to spend $10,000 on a facade. The only caveat, again, is that while we incent how much difference will a facade improvement, for example, make on the actual assessed value of the building to see a significant realization and incentive for a person? That's up to them to decide. Again, it's a nice bonus. If a person's going to do the improvement, they're going to do the improvement. But again, it all comes down to assessed values, and that's will come from BC assessment. So we want to encourage, we do want to encourage small projects, and that's a big one to contribute to the beautification of vibrancy in downtown. It's not just about seeing a specific form. We have to have mixed use development. We want to beautify the downtown. We want to create the vibrancy downtown. We have a lot of old buildings that could use some love, and we're seeing it happen regardless of having an incentive bylaw or not. If you've noticed the past couple of years, there's been some pretty significant improvements to some buildings. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rob,
Mayor.
I like the facade improvement idea. I've had a number of businesses on the strip that, they upgraded, their properties and no benefit. So when we talk about downtown, would we expand this through the business sector?
You certainly could. I think the one thing we would want to do is another caution that I learned back in 12, 13 years ago when we did this was when it comes to other business areas, for example, we can take the highway corridor where we have a lot of chain type facilities who are obligated by their franchises to do certain improvements at a certain time when branding occurs. That they have to do that anyways. Is that something that the city should be incenting? I mean, that's not, so you would want to have a very targeted approach to what would qualify for that type, because again, the chains and franchises of the world, they have to do improvements based on what their head offices tell them. Now, so do we give them a tax break for that? I don't know. It's just a broader discussion, but it's versus where downtown, typically we don't have those types of businesses. And again, we're trying to target the downtown. So it all depends on what council wants to achieve through this type of program and what we actually want to incent.
Thank you. Councillor Stetsky.
Thank you, Mayor. So related to that definition of a facade improvement, we don't really have standards that I'm aware of for wanting a particular look downtown. You may recall the fun we had over a decade ago trying to standardize sign bases and the uprights around a sign policy, and the interest the community showed at that point of anybody telling them what to do. So how would we define a facade improvement, and do we have any kind of a particular look we want to achieve downtown?
Sure, certainly, through the mayor. We don't have a very specific look, but we have design guidelines both through our official community plan and downtown revitalization master plan that help guide the look. We're not nearly a Canmore that dictates very specific looks. I mean, we have, certainly we have some stronger guidelines that go for and a desired aesthetic, but also offers some flexibility. I mean, ideally, and when we speak about facade improvement, it's any material or significant change to the face of the building, where a business goes and changes siding. I can take, for example, High Country is an example where it was wasn't a significant undertaking, but they did some signage, they did the siding, they did a sign, made a marked difference on the building. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for. We have the I don't even know what the name of the building is, where the Canada government office is across from the thrift store. They did some improvements to theirs. Or you take it a little bit further and do, Hush Furnishings, which was a much more significant facade / actual construction. Like there was some significant construction there. But with the guidelines we have, I think the goal is that if they're going to make that improvement to better the visibility or face of their building, then they would qualify without having those very specific, you must look like X.
Yeah, and that would be, council does have, the opportunity to provide input on that. Other communities are much more prescriptive in those aesthetic requirements. There's an ability to uphold those requirements through application, to be able to qualify for these items as well. So I think that's always a bit of a push and pull with how proactive a community wants to be, or how open to what businesses want to look at. And as Rob said, these values often these works often don't show up in improvement values as far as tax revitalization. So there's other tools that you can use with facade permits. You can look at fee reduction, especially if it's a very high value facade investment that isn't actually increasing the assessed value. Then there's other tools that we have as a local government to maybe to ease the burden if there is a desire to incentivize that type of work.
Okay, and then the next category, or essentially what we'd be looking for similarly to our previous bylaw, was doing exemptions for certain types of developments. Again, if we're trying to achieve residential, perhaps we would, consider offering the, 100% incentive if you do a mixed use commercial residential project, and maybe 80% just if you're doing a commercial build. Obviously that was the initial thinking behind the program we did back in 2013. Again, times have changed. We're now seeing, applications and renovations taking place, that would look at bringing some of this residential downtown. So again, it depends on what exactly are we wanting to incent. I mean, we could keep it simple and it's X percentage, regardless of if it's commercial and or mixed use residential in this confined area being the downtown core, or we can, split it up a little bit. And then would it incentivize the residential downtown, and, it could result in higher buildings of greater value and greater tax revenue. And this is largely would occur through major renovations, significant renovations, like we might see, across the street, for example, where we did the zoning change for that building directly across from us here on 11th, or new builds, where the construction values are much higher and there's a higher probability of significant greater increase in assessed values, which will ultimately result in greater tax revenue after the exemption.
And we have seen some high level proposals come forward for a couple of the vacant or undeveloped properties in the downtown area, and that's really a lot of what this focus is. Some of those, people have invested enough time in looking at some conceptual drawings, even getting close to building permit application stage. So could some of these incentive type programs tip the scales in their favor to look at going forward with it, and having that addition, not only to incentivize the addition of residential units, that often does help them take a look at that from a consideration perspective, and it may often help with their business planning to say, well, this could actually be ongoing revenue if I look at rental within my commercial development, it may make something more viable for them to go forward. And also, as Rob said, it could look at then those, rather than a 2 or 3 story building, a 4 or 5, 6 story building that would have a greater taxable income that would come forward in the future. And I think that's a big part of the consideration that we're looking at is we're not only trying to incentivize the good things that we want to see for community vibrancy and housing, but how quickly do we want to realize within the term of this bylaw some of those tax income timings, whether that's looking at the phased or whether it's looking at the 10-year term. A 10-year flat rate at 100% means 10 years without that municipal increase, especially if it's an undeveloped property that's all of a sudden going to have a multi-million-dollar development on it. So we don't necessarily want to defer for 10 years when we are looking for tax income that we want to see to help our tax base to help deliver the services, as council's been really faced with a lot of those conversations through this budget period. And that brings us to some consideration. There's been some discussion about the Victoria Avenue corridor. It's been identified through our OCP as a high density infill area. Similarly, there's a lot of undeveloped or underdeveloped properties along that corridor. So we would look at taking the draft of the downtown bylaw that we've worked on based on the previous. Much of these bylaws and the provisions in them, 80% of them are the same. And then you just look at the maps and you look at the type of projects that qualify, and then those can be applied to another area. And when we know there's been some discussion with council on looking to see that type of incentivization in those undeveloped areas. And if we can focus on getting more density in residential downtown on Victoria Avenue, closer to where a lot of our core services are, that's what most communities are trying to do rather than sprawl or see that on the periphery. And we think and we agree that that's a good thing. So what we would look at in consideration for that type of bylaw is, again, incentivizing higher density. We know that the servicing and the investments in servicing that are coming over the next few years are going to facilitate higher density. We know that there's amenities nearby. We know that there's transit in the area. So we know that we can really support that type of development. Rather than looking at something, from a medium density perspective. Again, greater incentives could be considered if there's the addition of commercial units, especially if there's anything commercial on a main floor that would support higher density. And often those come hand in hand with potential consideration of reduction of parking if there's amenities within the building. So it all goes hand in hand. That allows more density, allows more taxation, allows the project to be more viable potentially from the developer's perspective. And we did have a map that came out in the committee of the whole package that really shows the area that would be focusing on really the frontage of those properties that have the greatest potential to develop in that area. So then looking forward on the next steps and path forward, really take any of the discussion points that we've had or that we're going to have tonight and look at preparing a draft bylaw. We had started first when we had this discussion last fall with council looking in the downtown bylaw. We're going to see, based on council's feedback, if the Victoria Avenue corridor is a high priority as well, then we can try to bring that along in at the same time as far as dedicating staff time and consulting time and resources on it. We then look to bring that forward for council's review. In addition, and along at the same time, have that reviewed with BC Assessment Authority. Any legal review as necessary. We've already had some feedback with finance, and much of their input has been reflected in sort of the best practices or suggestions that we've brought forward. If we do continue down the path and really looking at creating a strong promotional material and strategy to get this out, not just to the community here, but to the broader development community. We feel that in discussion with a lot of best practices that other communities are doing, they're really creating a lot of promotional material around this. And it's not just the value of what you can put forward in the incentives, but how you can promote it as well. A lot of that media, a lot of that marketing, a lot of those things are big investments that private developers have to do. And it makes it a lot easier with the work that council's seen through Choose Cranbrook, through some of the videos that we've done, making that information in addition to these policy incentives, having a package that's ready for potential developers to be able to look and to bring to investors. That's also a big hurdle because we're seeing a lot of these developers are sitting waiting for updated information on investments, especially during times of uncertainty. So if we can shortcut that uncertainty and have that ready for them, It's a big promotion and a big bonus for us. And then we looked at adopting the bylaw, getting that information out there right away, and then creating a bit of a program for feedback and effectiveness. That's something that we haven't necessarily done in the best way in the past, is making sure that anybody that does want to participate in these processes, that we do ask them for their feedback as a part of it, so we can monitor, we can make tweaks and improvements, or bring reporting back to council. And then we'll just open it up for any questions or comments.
Councillor Ray, and then Councillor Stetsky.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. Regarding the previous downtown revitalization bylaw, I had feedback from a few businesses. So one business, I was, as a private citizen, I was encouraging them. I'm like, hey, this thing exists. You should apply. You've done this stuff. And for them, hey, I know we need to have a process that checks all the boxes, gathers the information we need so that we can communicate to BC Assessment. So for that business, the process was a barrier for them. Like the work to them felt onerous. So they chose not to do it. I mean, that's their choice. But I just wanted to share that feedback, which I'm sure you've probably heard previously. And then another business did go through the process successfully, but again, just shared that, gosh, the process seemed onerous. So yeah, I know. I don't know.
Surprising me because it's, sorry.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
that's
fair.
surprising because I think I mean, it was a basic application form
Yeah.
and verification of money spent.
Yeah, and I
Like,
think
that's really what it came down to.
Yeah.
So that was just a due diligence thing. We didn't think that would.
Yeah,
necessarily-
I hear
think
you.
It's a good feedback for sure, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might have been, I think, just thinking back to those conversations, probably the verification of expenses, but hey, I get it. You have to collect the information so you can make the
Yeah.
whole process work. And I appreciate your comments about, hey, we want to make this as streamlined as possible for everyone involved. So I just wanted to share that feedback. If we have opportunities to make it as user-friendly as we can and still meet the requirements of what we need to do.
Yeah, the alternative then would be like perhaps going with waiting for the BC assessment
Right,
increase,
if
right?
they-
So
Yeah,
they do their improvement based on so their building permit essentially is what the first qualifier could be.
yeah,
And then your verification is when BC assessment goes and does their thing.
yeah,
Just that the caution and information would be that it may not be as quick as you want because
Yeah.
assessments only come twice a year. There's your initial, then there's the
Yeah.
revised assessment rule, which
yeah.
I think happens in July. And we have to have our forms into BC assessment by, I believe, August in order
Yeah.
for them to qualify for the following year. So those are the kind of considerations, but that might be one way to mitigate that
Yeah.
or just, find another way. Yeah, so
And-
that's good information because.
I don't know if it would be feasible to offer people a choice, like, hey, if you want this to happen right away, then you need to verify your expenses. Or if
Yeah.
you're content to wait longer, I don't know if that's an option to give people a choice.
Yeah, we
But
could look at
anyways,
examples, look at some of
yeah.
the newer programs that are out there. Again, ours was quite old, or it is quite old now. But that's some interesting feedback because I hadn't heard that. So thank you.
And it could be even just an awareness of the process up front, where maybe they have professionals on site and then the project's done, and then they say, now I need to find somebody to do that, when it could have been rolled into the process of closing out the project during a final inspection in conjunction with our staff. So maybe there's a way just to help them have better awareness of it. So, because we all know hiring professionals to do this, we do it all the time, isn't cheap or easy. So streamlining something that they already need to do and they're very aware of ahead of time could make things better as well.
Councillor Stetsky, then Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. So in terms of looking ahead, the bylaw comes to council and we approve the bylaw. And then you've got creation of promotional material and strategy. How proactive are we intending to be? In other words, will we provide a list of lots or areas where we will consider it, or do we have to wait for the proponent to come and ask?
Once, Councillor Stetsky through the mayor, once the bylaw is, even once the first reading is done and we've got a lot of feedback from council and we feel like the area has been defined, then we can work on creating some of that promotional material. So that the physical boundary included with the bylaw is the one criteria for being within that area. So really that map would be available and we could share it. We could have a media release going out the night that the final bylaw is adopted, showing that area. So people would be able to readily look that up. With the increased investments that we're doing with the Choose Cranbrook site, that's really starting to broaden, and there's more awareness of it throughout the organization and within the development community. We can have we'd be able to have a web page set up specifically for this program that could go live, very shortly thereafter, so people could confirm, what would apply. So we'd want to have that to be very, very simple. People do like to find that information out themselves. We find it's a better use of staff time if people can be pointed to something that's user friendly. So we would really want to use the resources and the tools. Those tools we didn't have previously when this was built. So people would have to look for copies of bylaws and meeting minutes and phone calls, and that's just not really conducive to people seeing something that's simple and effective for them.
Councillor Graham?
Yeah, thank you. I'm definitely a big proponent of this. I think it's important. I think it's important that we have it with our downtown, and it's important that we have it with the Victoria corridor. I also like the phased approach of the percentages of 5 years, 175, 50, 25. I think that makes sense, because then you're budgeting for it too. It's not like it's all 5 years free, then all of a sudden you're getting it. So it's a way that we're giving a bit, and also, and then for us, it's the same for our budgeting process. So I think that's good. And also, would we not have it too? Because I know that it doesn't matter. It seems like it doesn't matter what we do. Someone can't find something that we've done, website, Facebook, paper, billboards, I didn't see it. So would we not, if somebody's developing in that corridor, would we not flag it and say, hey, check this out, you might qualify? So then that way, there's no I didn't know about it.
I think that's something we can do, Councillor Graham, through the mayor. We've also, we've been trying to work, looking at the downtown, working with the downtown community and having some conversations from that perspective. So, to be extremely proactive with this is I think something that we want to do. That can include mail outs to registered property owners of anybody that fits in that area, saying, heads up, this is something that's available. If we see a for sale sign pop up on a property that's in one of these areas, we can contact a realtor. So I think being really, really proactive with those things is something, especially when we're targeting it to these couple defined areas, which I think is the best thing to do. If the market gets really hot and these areas start to get filled in, and then there's other areas that could benefit from this, and that's where we talk about looking at that, highway commercial infill or broader downtown once there's more density that could happen outside of the core. But absolutely, I think we need to be trying to lead this and push this rather than just being on the receiving end of applications.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Peabody?
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, would it be worth exploring the ability for businesses that maybe lie just outside of the boundary, like for the downtown map, for example, being able to apply? I don't know if this was allowable in the past, but I just know I had communication from Ella's, and then the gentleman that owned the bowling alley, Encore. Their buildings laid just outside of the boundary. Is there a process for them to apply to be brought into the boundary? And is that worth exploring?
Councillor Peabody, through the mayor, once the bylaw is set, it is essentially seen as a law or policy that's fairly strict within that boundary. So it would need to have the bylaw changed in order to modify that boundary to do so. We have looked from a map perspective, really try to define some of those properties that may be in those fringe areas to make sure we do capture them. So we are looking at from the downtown area, that highway entrance, over where Ella's is right now, to make sure we're capturing some of that. So we'll take another look at that for sure, and we'd want to make sure that council has a chance to take a look at what that boundary map is as well, just to make sure we're not excluding anything that especially would have a high opportunity to do so. But when you're looking at something that may be a couple, 2 or 3 blocks away, then it does become more difficult, because it does have to be really a continuous boundary of what that area would be. But we do have that proposed map that was included in the package, but I think that would be a good opportunity for council to take a look at it and see if there is anything that they would potentially see in that area for modification.
Okay, thank you. We're good?
Okay, yeah, I think that's good. I think really the hope was that we would be sharing a lot of what we think are best practices on these items, especially looking at the term. I think the biggest feedback items that we were looking at is really looking at the term and the phased in versus a flat rate. It seems like phasing things in so we can start to achieve those taxable increases is something that we do want to see, and I think that does make sense in the climate that we are in, but still fronting a pretty, a larger exemption at the front that does help with the financial impacts of getting a business started, but then starting to realize that taxation, to come in over the term.
Thank you very much, guys. That's great information again. I'm looking forward to this, the completion of this for sure. Timeline, when do you think ballpark that we would be bringing the bylaw to council for approval?
Mayor Price, that's a great question. I wish I had a crystal ball and know that nothing else would come on our plate. Because some of these items weren't necessarily there until we started looking at these development insensitive initiatives. We're still concurrently working on a DCC bylaw. We're working on the fee and rates reviews. We're looking at zoning bylaw changes that are going to allow for potential changes in density or parking use and incentives. So a lot of these things are happening at the same time. But we do, if council has a strong desire for us to push at working on this, we do have the ability to access some of our operational funds when it comes to economic development and some dollars that we have there, so we can access support in a third-party manner to help develop these things. So I would be hoping in about a month's time there's a potential that we could have the draft bylaw in place.
Oh, wow.
I'd like
Very
to see
good.
it happen soon. Don't obviously this is recorded, so you can quote me on that. But if there's any changes or any hitch points in that, then we'll come forward with an admin update and just keep council apprised from this. And I know we discussed this as well. There had been questions about whether these things could be retroactive. For the most part, they can't be. But if there are projects that are in the stream that haven't applied for a building permit, but there are triggers like that, then we'll be cognizant of those. We wouldn't want to have a project come forward, apply for a building permit, receive a building permit, then have this adopted a week later and have them be cut out of the process. So those projects that we know that are in stream will have those types of communications to be proactive.
Great, Mike. And I just want to acknowledge that when these types of things come up, this is kind of a council ask outside the scope of your annual work plan. So, and we do this, we throw these little things in there, and they're not little things. We appreciate the amount of work that goes into it, and it's not something that was just scheduled to be there. So it's very much appreciated. Council, anything further? No. Thanks very much, guys. Are we going to talk about we're good with this? The sewer plant, we're good with that because we spoke about that last time, that we met. With the sewer upgrades to accommodate all this, are we good, Mike?
Mayor Price, we don't believe that we have any imminent concerns with developments that are currently in any formal application processes as far as the timing of the upgrades that we're working on. We're seeing, based on the proposals that we've received thus far in our infrastructure planning for our first capital project, the prices are within our budget or under our budget. So we are cautiously optimistic that the plans that we've brought forward for the first phase of the sewer upgrades are going to be something that will be realized. And we're really hoping that we have a strong application in place for funding that will support more additional housing along this Victoria Avenue corridor. So if anything from that perspective changes, if we do see a big uptake in projects along this area, then some of that may be a little bit of risk management. But most of these projects, if they are new, are in a 2 or 3 year time frame until occupancy. So we hope that we'd even have the latitude within our own funding mechanisms over the next 2 or 3 years to meet that and match those requirements.
Oh, good news. Thanks, Mike. Okay, that concludes the agenda today. And with that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Peabody, Councillor Bassett, all in favor? We're adjourned. Good stuff.